data, get the information. That's what we're trying to have you do. Okay, so the next piece of this, so we've done this, we said, here's how we're going to do the tactics. One of the questions people come up with is like, well, how am I going to go and find these folks? And in this case, it's good old-fashioned networking. It says a silly cartoon here. It says, one business card for your wallet, one for your desk, one for your car, one for your home office, one for your blue suit, one for your brown suit, one for your gray suit, on and on and on. So let's talk about networking tactics. So by networking, this is a great venue here. So anybody with a product idea, you've got an audience of people you could be networking with. But the first is cold email outreach. So you guys may have heard of cold calling. Well, really now the protocol is reaching out to people by email cold. That means I don't know you, but I'm going to reach out to you because I want to talk to you. And you could be my potential customer. And this is a bit of a silly slide because, but part of it is I see all these things. So one of the areas that you can first tap is your alumni network. So we found that to be very useful for folks at any level. If you do send these introductory emails, keep them brief. Make sure you copy the person that referenced you. And once again, I think I'm talking to a more professional audience here, but it's amazing how many people send out these very informal emails like they're sending out a text message. So these are all examples of things I've seen. Let me speak specifically to this last one about confidentiality. So if you send out an email, especially the first time you ever reach out to somebody and say, confidential information attached, that's a couple things. One, that they'll probably just delete your email. Right? Unless you already have a confidentiality agreement in place, do not send confidential information to people. The second, it actually shows a lack of sophistication. So they'll say, this person doesn't really know what they're doing. They're asking me to commit to something, to commit to viewing confidential information, but we have no relationship. And so try to avoid being confidential. And this concerns people because they want to be able to talk about their ideas, and they're very much afraid that their idea is going to be stolen if they talk to people. Truth be told, I've not seen it yet where somebody simply heard about an idea and went out and was able to do it. And if your idea does fit in that realm, I encourage you to run fast instead of trying to hide your idea. So the next one, we're actually in networking session. We're meeting with people one-on-one. These are all factors I've seen. I've seen some really rude behavior at networking events, and it just boggles the mind. So if you're trying to meet somebody and you're rude to the other people in the room, the person you're trying to meet is going to see that. And you're like, what's going on here? So one of the tricks I always recommend is talking to the speaker beforehand. So if you're going to an event and you want to talk to a speaker, it's funny, you've all seen this at these events that you go to. The speaker typically will get swamped afterwards, but beforehand, nobody's talking to them. I just went to an event on Tuesday. There was 150 people in the room. I wanted to talk to the guest speaker. I didn't actually have time to save for his presentation. So I went up and talked to him for 15 minutes, then I just left. But there was 150 people in the room, and not one of them was talking to the guest speaker. And I was kind of scratch my head and go, what are you doing? But actually, you're doing the guest speaker a favor. If they're about to get on stage, you're going to help them loosen up their vocal cords, but also figure out who's in the room. I went to a talk one time where the guest speaker was, I'm drawing a blank on his name now. The Crossing the Chasm guy, Judy, Clayton Christensen. So he's a Harvard Business School professor, has written a number of books. He's doing this speaking event in San Francisco. It was my first company was in the Bay Area. And so he was speaking to 250 CEOs from startup companies. So it was an invite-only event put on by an accounting firm. So they bring in this guy, Clayton Christensen, and I mean, they probably paid him $10,000 for a speaking fee. So there's 250 of us in the room, and I see him before the talk, sitting up, just kind of sitting off to the side, looking at his index card. I don't know what he's doing, just hanging out. So I go up and introduce myself. And so here's this very well regarded and distinguished Harvard professor, and I start talking about my business. And I figured this guy's day rate might be about $6,000, $10,000 a day. So I was doing the math, like that 15, 20 minutes was probably worth a few, $600, $700 of free consulting. So I was good with that. And then when he got up to give his talk, he knew at least about my business, not the other 249 in the room. So he's talking specifically about my business in context of his talk. And I remember his talk, I was just delighted he was talking about my company. So that was at least another $600 or $700 of consulting and advertising. So there's $1,400 of value right there. But then here's the thing that happened at the end is he finishes up his talk. He said, well, It was really nice being here tonight. I wish I could stay to talk to all of you, but I got a car waiting to take me, and I got a plane I'm about to miss. Thank you very much. And he went right out the side door. And I can feel everybody in the room like staying up, and he was gone. And so, talk to your speaker beforehand. Another one that is a human tendency one is when you go to networking events, don't talk to people you already know. And this is our nature, but it turns out you can talk to them all the time. I went to this big event down in Elmira about a year ago, and I traveled down there with one of my colleagues from the Southern Tier Startup Alliance, a guy named Ken Rother. And there's about 150 people in the room, many of whom we didn't know. We were just getting this organization off the ground. And the organizers had set us, it was like a breakfast working meeting thing, they had set me and Ken at the same table. And almost simultaneously, we both said, we don't want to sit together. And their reaction was, oh, these guys really hate each other. I said, but no, we both had the same reaction. Like, we need to be on opposite ends of the room. And so I actually said, can you sit me as far away as possible from Ken? And so I was at one end of this room, and Ken was at the other. And we tried to meet as many new and interesting people as we could. And when we were talking to people, we'd say to them, is there anybody else who you think I should be introduced to? And I could see across the room Ken doing the same thing, and people pointing and doing all this. And then on our ride home, we compared notes, and we made a lot of good connections. So don't talk to the people you already know. Try to avoid that urge. Some of these other some tactical ones that you hold your drink in your left hand so that when you shake hands, you don't get that clammy wet thing. Don't get drunk. Once again, this is one of these ones I have more of a problem when I'm talking to students, but students being a little price sensitive, they see many of these networking events have open bars, and so they'll say, ooh, it's my favorite price. And so they will go and overconsume, and I tell you this, I did a summer internship for a private equity firm, so a firm that does investment in privately held companies, and there's a small army of us, these intern analysts. And almost every Friday we would go to a different establishment to have an after hours, meet some of the senior people. And there was a few folks in that cohort who said, oh, open bar, top shelf, pour me some Grey Goose. And they did. And so they proceeded to get a little bit bombed, or a lot bombed. And so, I look back at that and said, wow, the money they lost in career opportunities and connections is 10 magnitudes higher than the money they saved on that free booze. So I will tell you, here's a trick I use. I record that, maybe not that this trick anymore. But one of the truisms is people who are drinking don't like to be around people who aren't drinking. So I'm not, I know we're in wine country, so I'm not exactly having to convince anybody of that, but if you're somebody who maybe doesn't want to have a drink, or like myself, if I get, after a long day, like I have a 15-month-old child, I've been up since 6 in the morning. If I'm a little bit tired and I have a cocktail, then my tongue gets really heavy, and then I sound drunker than I am. I do not want to sound drunker than I am. So my go-to drink is gin and tonic, hold the gin. Gin and tonic, hold the gin. If it's a cash bar, I'll pay, as if it's got the gin in it, I'll tip and all that. And so now you're holding a drink, and people around you who are drinking, they feel more comfortable, and you've got this in your hand, gin and tonic, hold the gin. And then if I have to reorder another one, I can just say to the bartender, yeah, I'll have another. And so bartenders, they'll just pour me another tonic water and no gin, charge me full price for it, and that's okay. And then last but not least, oh yeah, I forgot, not for dinner. This one too. You go to these networking events, and there's always like this finger food here, and thanks for you guys for putting it out. But you see these folks who get like those little mini plates, and they just start piling them up. It's like their own little Jenga game, and it's embarrassing for them. But just remember, you're not there for dinner. And so if you're going to a really important networking event, I actually encourage people to eat ahead of time. If there's somebody in particular you want to meet. And then one that's universally applicable is follow-up. And so it's always surprising to me. I will go to events, people will get my card and say, oh, I really want to talk to you, I really want to follow up, and they never do. They never follow up. And one of the things that's a little counterintuitive, and maybe goes back to on this slide here, is this call to action. I didn't spoke off. When you're meeting somebody or reaching out to them, give them something to say yes to. And so it's a little counterintuitive. We may say, hey, I'd love to meet with you and have a coffee or have a phone call anytime it's convenient. and you'll get a response like, yes. So that doesn't go anywhere. It's actually very helpful, whether it's a cold email or it's a follow-up from a networking, to actually give somebody something specific to say yes to. Say, I would like to meet you at your office for a coffee or have a call. Here's 3 times and dates that work for me. And so you're giving somebody something to say yes to. You're actually going to find that your likelihood of a positive reply is better if you give them something very specific. So do follow up and be specific. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I think I've shown a version of this slide before, but I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, do check it out. It's this is your social network for business. So this is different than your Facebook or your Instagram or all that stuff. This is your business connections. This is a website that I probably use 10 times a day, if not more. It's extremely valuable for making connections. So this will also help you as you build out your network of people you have on here, of getting connections to a company that you may want to do business with. So the first step in having a good LinkedIn profile is having a complete profile. So it's very common. It's not as common in the US, but in Europe, people put their photo on a resume. Well, I encourage people to put their photo in their LinkedIn. And you don't have to have anything crazy. I mean, everybody's got an iPhone, that's good enough quality. But just having a clear photo is like, oh, I met that person at that networking event. Now I remember who they are. And then what LinkedIn has is they have this meter of completeness. You get up into the 75–80% completeness, you've probably got a really good profile. I think it's an effort worth taking, because then you use this as a tool to get connected to folks that you can then go ask open-ended questions to. So we started with the open-ended questions, we talked about the tracking, now this is the tactic to how do I find those people. If I would really like to talk to somebody at Procter & Gamble about my toothbrush concept, how the heck am I going to do that? You're going to do it through LinkedIn. You're going to find those connections. What LinkedIn will tell you is, it's like, oh, hey, yeah, I know Lee. I see Lee is connected to a product manager at Procter & Gamble. Let's see if Lee can make that introduction for me. Very powerful website.
Can I tag on to that, Ed?
Yeah, please.
An important piece of that, too, is making sure that you're connected to people you actually know. Because in that situation, if he contacted me and said, hey, would you connect me to the Procter & Gamble person, and I've actually never met them, or I'm pretending to know the CEO or whatever, that's not going to help you in your networking as well. So the name of the game is not to have the most friends on LinkedIn. It is to have the most valuable business connections that are real.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So one of the things you will get, and carry on what Lee says, you'll get invitations on LinkedIn of people you don't know. It's okay, it's actually advisable just to not say yes to them. But if you've met them, you've had a conversation with them, sort of my rule is if I think I will follow up with them in a business context, I'll put them on LinkedIn or accept an invitation. But I get inquiries all the time from these just random, typically they're trying to sell me something. They're not scammers. They're just like, for example, this time of year I get a lot of inquiries from booksellers because they want me to use their textbook in next semester's course, things like that. So thank you, Lee. It's good advice. All right, surveys. So surveys are something that are useful as you're a little further down the road. Do not start with surveys. Many people want to start here because it's sort of a flavor of, well, I just want to stay in this room and have my suspicions or my hypothesis is verified. So surveys, I love them and hate them. I think they're useful once you've done these open-ended conversations, once you've seen the mosaic. They're good for starting to narrow down and get into the nitty-gritty details. So let me talk about surveys to some tricks. And I think you probably have seen many of these tricks, and so I'll go through these pretty quick. The first one would be brief and tell them how long it's going to take. This is another opportunity to ask open-ended questions. So I'm actually not a big fan of those radio buttons. I'm a big fan of ask a question, have a space, and let somebody type something in. Be very careful with the leading question. You saw an example of that. How much do you love my product? I was thinking about Stephen Colbert, the old one, not the new one, the one who was on Comedy Central. When he was doing his character, he would often ask guests this question. He'd say, George Bush Jr., great president or the greatest president? That would be an example of a leading question. Here, an open-ended question is, what do you think of the president? But I will tell you, when I've done all these surveys with my companies, I got to the point where I stopped paying attention to the survey questions. I'd ask 5 or 6 questions to prime the pump, and then these last 2 questions are the only ones I ever cared about. First one is there anything else you want to tell us? I would get gold out of that. It was just an absolute gold mine of information. And I would make sure that they had as much space as they wanted to fill. I mean, people would write me tomes about my product, my service, my company. It was really useful. Is there anything else you want to tell me? Just it's a wide open. Get your customers talking. And then the last one there is, would you mind if we reached out to you? Which ultimately, I view surveys as a way to get back to having open-ended conversations with people, not as a way to gather a lot of information. So surveys can be useful. So here we go. The summary. This is a little shorter talk than I normally give, but replace the things I believe with data. My customer wants, my customer need. Here's why. Talk to lots of people. Have a plan. Keep track of those. Keep track of that information, and take a mosaic theory. Step back and look at the data and say, what is this data telling me about what my customer need is? Boy, nice paragraph there. This is the book we use. It's you can buy it on Amazon for $18. So the business model generation. This is a customer-centric model for building out what my customer need is. So we no longer advise people on making a business plan. We find those to be stale documents that are cumbersome and almost out of date. They're sort of like yesterday's weather forecast, right? As soon as they're done, you don't need them anymore. So they're not very useful. The business model canvas is a dynamic document that we like very much as a teaching tool. So ultimately it's this. You make what customers want to buy. Don't try to sell what you want to make. So with that, my contact information, I'm happy to take questions on this, and then we're going to do what's next in open mic. So any questions on customer tactics?
I have a question. So if you're a business, does it matter what the business is? So for example, you mentioned selling, making a product that you're going to market to a consumer. But say your business is landscaping, or it's consulting, or it's something different, it's more of a service. Would that change how you approach your questions and finding your audience to ask the questions of? And if so, what would that be?
Yeah, so if you're using the landscape example, it would be before you go out and buy a bunch of azaleas, find out what kind of plants, what the need you're trying to fulfill is. So you wouldn't say, hey, do you want azaleas? You say, what are your needs what are your landscaping needs? So really open-ended questions. The example I can think of where I am is if you have something pretty, a deer is going to eat it. So I wouldn't say, hey, I want azaleas. I would say, I want something pretty that a deer won't eat. So that's ask me about past behavior. And you can certainly couch it into your category about what your needs are, but that would be a way to approach it. And then if you get a whole bunch of people saying, yeah, I want pretty things that deer won't eat, that's going to start to indicate, okay, here's a business need that I'm feeling, here's a want that people have. I can go with that, but now I've got data to tell me what I want. I'd be very cautious of I just got a bunch of azaleas, all I need to do is sell them. Right, and I did a version of this talk, and I put up this slide. It was for some cheese manufacturers. So they had this conference for everything. I was invited to speak at this cheese conference, and I was talking about customer development. And one of the people came up to me and said, well, gosh, we made all this, I can't remember what kind of cheese, and nobody wanted it, but it turns out people wanted this other kind of cheese. I'm like, why'd you make that cheese? Because the raw ingredients of cheese are essentially milk and I don't know what else, but milk, a lot of milk. So you could have made that into this other cheese, but they had not talked to any customers. So they made all this cheese, and then they were trying to push it, where if they'd listened to their customer, they would have made this other cheese and been able to sell it. And so they were upset that there wasn't a subsidy on this type of cheese, but this type of cheese was selling like crazy. But that just doesn't make sense. Why should we subsidize a bad decision when you could have taken that same milk and put it into something that, because they didn't talk to their customers. They did this. They tried to sell what they wanted to make instead of listening to the customer. And they're like, oh. So that answer your question? Any others? Sir.
Actually, so what if you're in a business that has some particular limitation, as an example, Finger Lakes Wineries? a lot of demand for big reds out there. The Finger Lakes is not that California is the place to grow big reds.